Good morning, folks. Just setting up a show. This is kind of an impromptu one. I wasn't really planning on doing one today, but I ran into an old video that I had forgotten to kind of cover and wanted to go over it. So I'm just kind of waiting for people to get notifications and maybe pop in. Let's see here. Didn't really get the word out. So, yep, a few people are starting to come in. So, yeah, I guess I'm going to, kind of went a live impromptu. Usually I schedule these at least half an hour in advance, usually more, but was kind of playing around this morning. I'd been up early, was watching some things, found this video from about 3 months back, 2 or 3 months back, from a radio YouTuber named Brett Keane. And I only know him through guys like The Raging Atheist. And I think The Raging Atheist is a theist now. But this conversation, I think this is the most recent, the last conversation he had with Darth Dawkins, and it's not a long one. But I figured I'd go over it and take a look at it. I have not watched this. I found it. I have fast forwarded the part where he pops up in the show. In fact, I will do this now. Let's just show that there. Yeah, so I'm going into this one sight unseen. So we'll see. Usually mods on this, from what I understand on this one, are usually pretty good, so I'm not too worried about this getting too nasty. Well, let's say hello to a few people that have shown up. 420 Atheist, good to see you. Daisy, good morning. Jed Stucker, good morning to you. Michael Fredgren, good to see you. John Vapiana, good morning to you. It's much earlier in the morning for you than it is for me. Some guy named Bob94, good to see you. Jail Warren, good to see you, my friend. Dan Pettinger, you've got a weird fluttering noise going on. It was probably because I was moving some stuff around. Yeah, apologies. Daisy writes, Raging Atheist is a theist now. Yeah, I think he is. He's got a couple videos saying that something to that effect. I haven't watched them yet, but those were the titles of them. So, he's got some stuff going on in his life. And really, I think he's been struggling quite a bit ever since really COVID. During the pandemic and the lockdowns and stuff, but I think recently he's hit some hard times. So, but I haven't talked to him personally in a long time. But yeah, in fact, my brother had told me about it. He's like, I think, yeah, he's doing some videos. It looks like he's, I don't know if he's become a Christian or he's converted to whatever, but yeah, I think that's what's going on. But Jadis confirms he had a couple of religious experiences and now he's a theist. Yeah. So, okay. I'm amazed Darth can pop up for anything. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that he even went over onto this because I thought that Darth Dawkins. I don't know much about Brett Keane, but Brett Keane's been around, I think, since like the old days. Like the G-Man days, and he's still kind of lingering around, and I don't really track his show, but I thought that Brett Keane and Darth Dawkins hated each other. So. Oh yeah, do me a favor. Can you review the Darth Grounded and Evil Time Rabbit vid from 2 days ago? It's only 30 seconds. I want to hear your thoughts. I kind of want to know the guy that asked that question. I know exactly which one you're asking about. Yeah, I'll probably get. Yeah, if there's time, yeah, I'll do that one towards the end. More more gratuitous windbaggery. It's my brand of windbaggery, so it's at least gratuitous. It might even be superfluous. My husband concurred with Daisy request. Yeah. Scott Duke, good to see you. All right. Let's see here. So, yeah, let's get this one started and see what happens here. So I've got this at about the point, like I'd kind of scrubbed through and waited until I saw, whatever his name is from American Idol pop up. Because I think he went into this with like his Evolution False Yahoo account. Are you guys all hearing a weird noise? I'm hoping it's not traffic coming in from the window. Let me take a... Oh, you know what? Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah, there's like a stutter going on. Yeah, that's kind of. I think this mic must be going bad. I don't have a fan going on in the room, but I heard it. It's almost like I don't know if it's like catching my breath or what, but yeah, I think it's kind of intermittently catching. Let me try to pull it further away from that side of my face. But yeah, let's take care of something here. JL Warren asks, wondering if you might host a debate. Yeah, I might be able to. When and with whom? Um, that's all I would wonder. It's a constant patter. Huh. Let me check my connection. Yeah, it's got to be this mic. That is weird. Yeah, I can hear it now too. Get into my audio settings and see if I can like turn. I think that got rid of it. Yeah, that's really weird. Interesting. Jefferson, turn off the vibrator. Yeah, that was it. I left it on. Yeah, it was in the chair. Yeah, still going. After a while you go numb. So you can just you can only have so much pleasure. Let me go back here and see if I can. Huh. Yeah, it seems to be happening with anytime I talk. I don't know. I'm gonna have to run with it. I'm starting to get the. I'm getting the impression that it's happening. Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if that's maybe a sound, like a StreamYard thing, because nothing's happened with this headset unless the mic is starting to act up. Um, yeah, it's odd. I changed some of the settings a little bit, moved a couple things around. I'm not sure where it's picking that up from because I've got a Rode outside, but that's not what that is. It's if it keeps going, if it's turned off now, that'd be good. Yeah, sorry, I do audio as a hobby. I get it. I do too, Dan. That kind of stuff really bugs the hell out of me. So, um, yeah, this guy named Howard Stirrup challenged me. Howard Stirrup challenged J.L. Warren to a debate. What's Howard Stirrup's story, J.L. Warren? That'd be interesting to know. Um, and that would be what's more rational, theism or atheism? Huh. Well, I mean, what's more rational? I always find that topic a little weird. That's not the first time somebody's posed that one as a debate topic because they're both rational. The trick is whether or not they're true. Something can be rational but not be true. So, although unless you ask certain theists and they're like, no, you can't be rational and be an atheist. Like, so you're saying I have no reasons to not be convinced of a divine being. Okay, that seems that's a stretch. Yeah, that's a good point too, Leo. Positions aren't rational; agents are. Yeah, yeah, that just seems kind of odd. Um, oh, Howard Stirrup is a flurf. Oh boy, I mean, JL, yeah, if you're interested in doing it, if you guys hammer out a topic or whatever, and you want me to host, we can kind of set that up. If you want me to do it kind of the way that I hosted debates between Michael, the Canadian atheist, and what was his Testicles by Fire, or whatever his name is, Testes by Fire. We could, I can ask Peter to help produce. So it's kind of set up the same way. That usually worked out pretty well. So, yeah, just let me know if you've got a time. You can always DM me or email me at jeffersonspatchcock@gmail.com. And yeah, we can talk about it, from then. But yeah, just kind of, I mean, generally kind of work it out amongst yourselves, like what kind of day and time you want. And then I'll jump in to see what we can hammer out between the three of us. And then, yeah, that'd be it. So, okay, everybody. Well, I guess that's it. I will get this one started. Let me change the aspect ratio here. Okay. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, StreamYard's not. I'm waiting for it to like actually lock up. So if the stream ends, it's acting weird today. They must be like on the verge of pushing an update or just pushed one or something, but it is acting weird. So okay, so I'm gonna get started with this one. So this was Darth Dawkins popping in as Evolution False on a Brett Keane's channel, God TV Radio, his YouTube thing. And he's jumping in there. I think he jumps in there specifically to talk to the Raging Atheist. So here we go. Let's see what happens.
That's somebody new in the room. Mr. Evolution False, how are you today?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, how you doing? I recognize that voice. How you doing, handsome?
You're too complimentary.
Okay, so maybe they are friends.
All right, I can take the mask off the screen now because I know you're not going to throw a pecker out on me.
No, not at all.
So if I held up a woodpecker right here, would that cause problems for your channel?
You know what I'm talking about. These atheists sometimes treat my room like it's a strip joint. I don't know what that's all about.
Apparently the atheists that go to Brett Keane's YouTube channel like the porn bomb him.
This is totally like that web chat site, right?
Well, yeah. Brett Keane is the only person who's kicked me off of his stream multiple times that I still have endearment for. So
I still love you, know that.
Well, that's because when you kick me, you're not being malicious. You know, it's not a malicious kick. So
oh, okay.
You beat on those atheists so bad, I start to feel sorry for them.
Oh, this guy looking dick riding.
We're just goofing, raging, just goofing. But
yeah,
continue
so
on, guys. Get in the conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Knock here why his atheism is reasonable.
Oh God, here we go. I don't know if I'm ready for you yet, Darth.
Why is atheism reasonable? I mean, come on.
Coffee's still kicking in, Rage.
I'm about coffeeed out.
This is fascinating because this sounds like another one of these like Darth questions where, you know, Darth kind of wants to engage in kind of a street epistemology kind of questionnaire. Like, okay, hey, why is your atheism reasonable? Just like a street, the sort of the street epistemologists that, you know, are atheists will ask like believers, hey, you believer, you know, are you a Christian? Are you religious? You know, what, you know, I hope they don't. Like, do you think that your belief, your faith tradition is reasonable? Like, I don't really know exactly how this is supposed to work because generally speaking, most religions or faith traditions, there's reasons for them and they're generally reasonable to kind of go along with. The idea would be about whether or not a position like the existence of an absolute, ultimate, omnipotent, omniscient being, you know, is that a reasonable thing to conclude? based on argumentation and analysis. The idea that your religion or your faith tradition being reasonable, they can be perfectly reasonable. In fact, you don't even have to believe in what undergirds the faith tradition. You can still be a Catholic and be questioning. You could be a Muslim and a doubter. You could be a Buddhist, but not entirely and depending on the Buddhist, I don't know. There's some Buddhist sects that are a little bit more into ritual and a little bit more dogmatic about them. But even if you're in some of those, it depends on your level of commitment. So the idea that you have a reasonable position about something, or is your atheism reasonable? Sure, right? And I hope I don't ever ask a Christian, and if I do, somebody check me on this. Hey, is your Christianity reasonable? Because I'd like to think I already know that it is. To whatever extent they're involved in their form of Christianity, it's reasonable. That's not really a meaningful question to ask.
I don't know. Because it's me, man. I don't know. Why is it not? Why is it not reasonable?
I'm waiting for an answer. You're quite an outspoken atheist and atheist YouTuber. I'd like to know why your atheism is reasonable. Can you please explain that to me?
I don't know, because I don't see any evidence for a God. I don't have any reason to believe in a God.
So you've stated that what you're telling us is that you've decided that all the things around you are standalone with respect to God. Now, how did you make that determination?
Say that again. Everything
when you
around
say
me
there's
standalone?
when you say there's no.
How did you make the determination? Well, this will be interesting, because now he's kind of shifting already. If you don't have an alternative for the God, I can't demonstrate. Darth Dawkins. Yeah, good to see you, Jay. And you're up early today. Spooky, good to see you. Athena, nice to see you as well. Let me see here. Marty, it was good to see you. I had highlighted you before. Nerdy, good to see you. And let me see. There was someone else here. I think that's it. And Blessed Be Here. Raging Atheist is an idiot. That's not nice, Blessed Be Here. I didn't mean to highlight that one. I was just trying to say hi to you, but yeah, that's not nice. Rage and I do disagree on certain things, and now that he's a theist, we probably disagree on a few more things. But this is already starting off bad between him and Darth, because Darth has already kind of started it off with one of these casual questions, and I don't know. Darth gets super triggered if somebody starts asking one of his seemingly casual questions with an answer that kind of refers back to their psychological disposition about religion. Right? Why are you an atheist? Well, I'm not convinced that there is a God. That's just, it's almost similar to saying I lack belief. That is your psychological disposition. And now he wants to know, wait a minute, how did you determine that? And layered into that, like I've said many times, is this idea that, hang on now, if you're not into God, then you got to be all about the science. Science is your God. And with science, it's all going to be naturalism, materialism, empiricism. And he'll just bundle all that stuff together. And so without empiricism, if you haven't determined empirically that there is no God, or if you haven't, maybe Darth is a little bit more generous, and you haven't determined that rationally there is no God. I don't think that he has, though, because anytime I've mentioned something like Stephen Mason's argument against the concept of an ultimate, that could serve as a really good idea, a really good rational basis for why you don't believe in the kind of God that Darth is trying to, I don't think that an ultimate being is possible. And I kind of agree with Mason's points on that. That's from a philosophical perspective. But the way Darth opened this, it was more like, okay, why is your atheism reasonable? What? What? I would hope. I would not ask it. I don't, of all the Christian groups and denominations, I wouldn't ask a Jehovah's Witness if they're Jehovah's Witnesses as a that was a weird way to say it. Whatever. I wouldn't ask them if their faith tradition was reasonable. There's reasons for them being in it. They were raised in it. Their family's a part of it. They have friends there. There's doctrine and dogma and stuff. There's probably a lot of stuff about it that they don't agree with, and other things that they do, and other things that they change if they could. But it's reasonable. They're using that as a part of their life. It's So it's reasonable. They believe that there's evidence for it because there's books and traditions and theology, and these things talk about the existence of a God, and those things serve as evidence for them that this stuff might be or very likely is true. So it's reasonable. For an atheist, like, yeah, I've seen those books, I've seen those traditions, and I've seen studies on them and seen biblical criticism of them, and I'm not convinced that they're literally true. I'm convinced that people believe them. I'm convinced that people have different takes on them. I'm convinced that they have traditional and cultural weight, in different societies and different places in time. But I don't think that it's based on anything actually real. And that's also a reasonable position too. And where people are going to agree is whether or not what we're actually talking about, the meat of it, is true or false, which is whether or not there actually is a God. I don't know why Darth just doesn't ask that. You don't think there's a God at all, right? Nope. Why not? Because I haven't seen any convincing evidence of it. When Rage says this, he's like, well, there's no evidence for God. That is too easy for people to say that. And it was a really common thing, I think, for a lot of people to say, because I think there used to be this argument that, well, this isn't evidence in a particular sense. And it's like, no, it is. Things like the Bible and things like that, I'm willing to concede that. That's evidence of God. You've got lots of faith traditions talking about God. But if you're going to take that as evidence, there's a ton of evidence about lots of different gods. And it gets really noisy really quickly. And so if you're willing to concede it on that grounds, and the Christian that you're talking to is willing to as well, then you'd be like, okay, so how do you then make a determination between, say, the God of the Hebrew Bible versus the God of the Christian Bible versus the God of the Quran? And usually they'll start pointing out that there's inconsistencies in, the God, in Allah and the God of Quran. So rambling about that anymore is unnecessary, but you end up getting into a point where they're really holding a double standard. Like, well, you have to accept that these stories count as evidence for my God. Okay. But if I do that, that means I'm going to count other stories for other gods as evidence too. And now you probably might be in a situation where you need to make the case why yours is more likely to be the one that actually exists, and theirs are made up. And then they don't usually want to do that. So,
evidence for God, that's a claim, right?
I guess, yeah. I mean,
okay.
I've just never found any.
Okay, so that's a claim that when we talk about all the things around us, the sun, the moon, and the stars, the grass blowing the wind, we will make a decision of one of two things: either that it is indicative necessarily of God, or it is not. So you've decided.
No, you don't. There are those that suspend judgment. This is not true. Like, now he's insisting on attempting to create a dichotomy out of a person's psychological position. But you might be able to do this if somebody's trying to create a problem in philosophy, or trying to create some kind of an argument. But if you're just talking about somebody, like he said, the grass is moving, it's being blown in the wind, or the stars, you're going to decide right then and there. This is just a longer way of saying you either affirm or disaffirm the existence of God every time you talk about the existence of anything else. Do you think that cup in your hand could exist without God? Well, you're wrong, son. If you say no. So this is just kind of stupid, but the idea, this has been brought up before. Like, well, you have to affirm the metaphysical underpinning of what made these things in order to really be able to say anything about what you believe about those contingent things. This is the thing that has never been shown to have any kind of real connection. I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen it in people that try to traffic in transcendental arguments either. I'm still waiting to see them make this connection. But here we go.
And you're making the claim that all these things are not indicative of God, that they exist standalone without reference to God. That's your position?
I guess, yeah. I guess.
Good.
Yeah.
And how did you make that determination?
I don't know. Just one day I came to that conclusion.
Was there a reason behind it?
Several, I guess. I mean, several different instances in my life. I don't know. God never really answered prayers for me. I never really had the feeling that that God was with me, like a lot of people describe, I guess would be an honest way to describe it. I don't know. I talked about earlier a moment where, you know, I looked around me, I was in prison, and I looked around me, and I'm like, most of these people believe in the same God I believe in, and they're still horrible just like I am, you know. So I don't know, I just came to the conclusion that God doesn't exist, that, you know, like, this is what we got right here.
Okay.
So God doesn't exist because of a lot of people being horrible?
Yeah, that's a non sequitur. So
well, actually, it's not necessarily. Because he didn't. This guy's already changed it. The guy in the that shirt. He didn't say that he doesn't believe in God because there are bad people. It's a very important distinction that just got paved over. He said that he was in prison and he's looking around, and a lot of the people that are in the prison with him are believers. They're saying they're Christians. So a couple things happen when that happens, and then he's saying, and they're just as bad as me. Like these are still bad people, and they're claiming to be Christians. If you've been taught that there is a regenerative property to the Holy Spirit, and that believers, true believers, you know, will have this regeneration happen to them if they're repentant, they will become better people through the inner working of the Holy Spirit. If you see a lot of evidence of people who clearly are not behaving any better than they're not even behaving at the standard of sort of the quote unquote outside world, the godless world. These people are bad. They've committed crimes, multiple crimes in some cases, and maybe they're not particularly repentant of the crimes they've committed. That would kind of, the more you see that starts becoming evidence against the notion that the Holy Spirit has some kind of regenerating effect on the heart. And that's a strike against anything demonstrating positively for the Christian God. So these guys are trying to say, oh, well, so you're just saying just because there's jerks out there, that means there's no God? No, because that wouldn't follow. But in order to do that, in order to prop that up, they had to disregard the key factor that he said. These are bad people who are believers.
Bible says that most people are. Bible says all people are horrible at their core, so I don't see that as a compelling reason.
So when you say there's no evidence for God, that is the same thing as saying
I've never had a God talk to me.
Okay, so yeah, I've never had God speak to me either. But so when you say there's no evidence for God, you hopefully you agree that that's the same thing as saying that these things do not and cannot stand in causal relations to God. Do you agree with that?
Do not and cannot are two different things. Like if it's not a thing, then they don't. If it is a thing, maybe they could, if it's capable of being responsible for all those things. But that's a weird way to put things.
I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess that I can agree with that. I think I'm following what you're saying.
So your position is God does not exist because all the things around you cannot and do not stand in causal relations to God. Is that your position?
So he needs this to be the position. Like he's just insisting that this is what it is. Oh, so that's your position. Nothing. So God can't and doesn't stand in causal relation to all the things that you see around. No, that's not why I don't believe in God. The reason that Darth still believes that you need to do this is because buried in his theological approach to this is the assumption that God is a necessarily existing ultimate upon which all other things are contingent. So if you are trying to assert that something could be independent of God, you're asserting that everything is independent of God, which raises an interesting question about the grounding for evil.
I guess.
I think
how did you determine that?
I don't know. I just came to a conclusion one day.
So was it arbitrary?
Like
he actually gave his reasons, but these clowns didn't actually listen to him. He gave those reasons, and they blew over him. And the guy at the top, T-T-O-R, T-Tor, strawmanned him. Jay, why did Darth just say God has never talked to him if he's been convicted by the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit is God? Yeah, I mean, good question. Who knows? I mean, Darth's theology is quite whack.
What do you think? Like everything around me is not causal, whatever. Are you talking like, so I go out in the environment and there's a tree there, right? And that's I when I see that tree, I don't see like God there. I don't know what I'm not
Okay,
quite
so
sure.
you've decided that it does not stand in causal relation to God, right?
Yeah, I don't think that tree has a relationship with God.
Good. You mean when we say relationship, we're talking about having its ultimate origin in God, both chronologically.
Sure. Yeah, I think it grew out
Okay,
of the
so
Right, which would be evil. Darth has no problem separating evil from God. Evil is not contingent upon God. He can't figure out where evil comes from. And the entailment here, based on what he's trying to set up, it would entail that evil must be. Like that is a necessary entailment. Unless you're going to start arguing in lots of different kinds of ways, like ultimate properties that God taps into or something like that. There's a almost like a God that coexists along with Platonic forms or something like that. But otherwise, this idea that all this stuff is dependent upon God, everything stands in causal relation, is sort of weird. Because I think as far as he's concerned, he only wants to talk about that in terms of physical stuff that we interact with in the here and now, in this universe. The mundane has to be connected to this God, which is transcendent of those mundane things. But then he'll talk about these bigger concepts like space and time also being contingent upon God. And despite the fact that we don't have a complete understanding of space and time, he has no problem asserting that those things are just necessarily contingent upon this absolute being. Cool. He also will make claims that our morality is necessarily contingent upon God because it is that which conforms to the will and the mind and the character of God. So where does evil come from? Well, that's just something that doesn't conform to the will and nature and mind of God. Okay, how is that possible? And if you ask him that, he can't explain it. This is a huge problem for pre-suppers. Pre-suppers like Darth in this vein that try to argue this, like, we have everything's locked down. They have to deny the existence or the grounding of evil. They have to make it something so completely subjective that evil is just, well, that's just a side effect of people doing things outside of what God wants. All right. But our capacity, the possibility, that which can be and cannot be, which Darth always invokes, necessarily comes from God. So how do I have the possibility to do evil if not for God? And if I do, if that isn't God, what is that possibility grounded in? The possibility to do otherwise. No answer.
So you're making a claim there. Now, how did you determine that?
Well, just because I don't know, I've watched a tree grow out of the ground.
That doesn't, I watched the tree growing out of the ground too. I'd like to know how you determine that the tree is not causally related to God. Your position is that the tree is not causally related to God. The theist position is that the tree is causally related to God as the first cause. But you've decided that the tree is not causally related to God,
yeah,
right?
Your position.
Right. But does it follow that it's now causally related to nothing? This seems to be where Darth wants to go with this question, because he does it quite often. If it's not causally related to God, then ultimately it's not related to anything, and then it just doesn't exist at all. Or it exists in some chaotic world where it could be a tree one minute and an inverted unicorn the next, or something. Like everything just turns into topsy-turviness, which is not really an entailment. The entailment of his worldview is that there wouldn't be anything. There would be no tree. There'd be no good. There'd be no evil. There'd be nothing.
Is that God caused that tree?
I haven't given my position. All I'm interested in right at this juncture.
And, my position is that God did not cause that tree.
Good. And how did you determine that?
Because I don't see God causing the tree. I see it growing.
That's a non sequitur.
I don't know how to answer it. Then tell me how to
Do you
answer.
Do you know what a non sequitur is?
Kind
As
of.
A non sequitur is something that does not follow.
Okay.
Okay, well, if it's a non sequitur, just because there's no tree, just because a tree grows doesn't mean God didn't create it. All right. How does it follow that when you see a tree grow that there is a God that made that happen? Now, there's differences in these in in ancient stories and stuff about God's doing this kind of stuff, but this kind of theological take where everything is just God's responsibility is dangerous for Christians. If the entailment is, well, the only reason that tree is growing is because of God's will. Darth has said, and I've stated this many times, his theological position is that God not only started the universe, but his energy and will actively maintain the universe in its present state, which means that for him, anything that's going on, any trees growing, are the result of God's enervation of the universe. Without his enervation, without that injection of energy into the universe would cease to be. So he didn't just kick it off. He's actively turning the wheel. He's like a turnspit dog, just running that little circle, keeping that chicken moving over the fire. He's got to run on that wheel, and if he stops, the operation stops. So, okay, what about the operation of the universe around us? How does it follow that there's this because it's not just that there is a thing operating this, it's that it's specifically his thing. How does that follow? How does an ultimate being, a disembodied mind with omni properties, follow? Because it might very well be something else.
Okay, so when we're talking about either God being the chronological or contemporary ultimate source, when you say, I don't see it, right, you're just simply restating the same claim that it doesn't stand in causal relations to God. So
you're asking me why I came to that conclusion.
Give me 10 more seconds. Give me 10 more seconds.
Cool.
When you say, I just don't.
Vesper writes, I asked Darth if reality exists, and he won't say because he knows reality is a bigger category than a God is a subset of. Yeah, good question. He's arguing from a position of Hegelian absolute idealism, by the way. Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not great at Hegelianism or at Hegel's philosophies, but yeah, this does seem to me to be that kind of form of absolute idealism. But I think that's kind of what a lot of tag arguments are grounded in, and there's a lot of this insistence that it has to be. This is all reflective of the mind of this greater being. I think maybe Earth backs this up. He says because the existence that any tree has is eternal, and the tree has it, but it is not such existence or God. That doesn't make sense. I don't know what you're talking about there. Okay, God is existence itself or himself by definition. That's one of the definitions of God. Well, if God is just being, then I don't know why it would be controversial to tell Christians that evil is grounded in God. And I think what some open theists might actually not have an issue with that. Because I think they might think that the idea that there's an omnibenevolent being or any of these other omni properties is a theological negotiation with biblical texts, and the idea of trying to say that that's that necessarily has to be translated that way is a reach. But I don't know.
See it. You're just repeating the same claim. Do you realize that?
No, but thanks for telling me.
Well, it is. When you say, I just don't see it. If you say, well, there's no evidence for God. Why? Because I just don't see it. You're repeating the same claim in different words. So how did you decide and determine?
Okay, then evil, because evil is not a thing as such. Okay, then what is good? Because I've seen this happen before where Christians want to have this both ways, where they want good to be objective. Okay. And they'll define it as God. God is good, and just bury it into tautology. But then they'll talk about evil as being something relational to human will and failing to meet God's requirements, or failing to do the thing that he wanted, for whatever that's worth. Okay, so good is doing whatever God wants then, from a human perspective. Our perspective looking up at God. Good is doing what he wants. Evil is doing what he doesn't want. That makes good and evil completely subjective. So you can't say that there's an objective good and objective evil, when the ways that you end up having to define it in order to get God away from being the thing upon which evil is contingent is to say, well, these are descriptions of relations. Okay, then it is just subjective. It's just subjective to whether or not a person is conforming to the will of God or not. So I would have no problem with that as long as Christians would be willing to give up the idea of objective evil and objective good, but they're not. Most of them, no. We know what is objectively good. It is the will of God. No, it's not. Because God just definitionally is good. God can't do anything according to his all power that we would define as good or bad, but we can be defined as being good or bad in our relationship to God based on the things that we do. So it's subjective. But if somebody tries to turn around and make an argument appealing to morality, well, where does good come from? How do we know what the right thing to do is? How do we know what the bad thing to do is? If somebody says, well, we base it on the way that humans treat each other, or treat their environment, or treat other creatures. It's based on these kinds of relations. But like, no, that's entirely too subjective. Are you one of these relativists, these postmodernists? No, there has to be something objective. There has to be an objective standard. And what is the quote unquote objective standard from Christians when they back off it? Well, God is goodness. No. In order to describe it, the definition then is good and evil based on humans is how you perform according to what God wants you to do, which keeps it subjective. And that standard comes from God. So it doesn't matter that it is a thing as such. Time may not be a thing as such. I mean, it probably is, but other concepts that we have are not a thing as such. But Darth would argue that they're all grounded in God. He would argue that all concepts are grounded in God, whether or not they're an ontological thing, an actual thing. So I still think that if you have to ground everything else, but evil gets carted off, because it used to be the tact on this was that atheists can't ground their morality, and they could. And now people are starting to get clued in on the fact that if you follow this line of logic from these guys, Christians can't ground evil. They can't ground morality, because if they're trying to say you can ground it as long as you're willing to accept that it's subjective, but you can't claim that good and evil are objective things and then turn around and explain them away in a subjective way and then try to hold the atheist to a substandard account and say that they're lacking. They're not. By the way, your questions are begging what truth is, so your questioning is self-defeating or fallacious since you can't support it from your non-Christian Satanism. Well, if you're just going to tell me that I can't support it because I'm not a Christian, then all you're doing is basically saying, like, you don't have to trust me because I'm not. You wouldn't even trust me to do an internal critique of your worldview, which is completely fallacious. So you don't need to actually continue to talk to anyone. You've adopted a position where you can't be falsified by anyone. You could only be corrected by other Christians, and you can always lean into, if you're getting corrected and your feelings are getting hurt, Earth, you can always lean into the possibility that that person that's correcting you, that Christian, might not be a good Christian, might not be a real one. Maybe Satan has gotten into them, and they're telling you things you don't want to hear to make you feel bad and make you question yourself. You know you're right in the eyes of the Lord. And how would you know?
That facts around you exist stand alone without reference to God. And saying, because I just don't see it, is simply restating the whole same claim. How did you rationally decide that everything you're acquainted with exists without reference to God? How'd you determine that?
Because I had rejected God.
On what basis?
Yeah, I could get back into this in a bit. Earth says, you still begging the question when saying that. I'm still begging the question when saying that. Am I still begging the question because I have to assume God before I say anything, Earth? Is that your belief?
Because I didn't believe in it anymore. I
Yeah,
stopped.
well, you're just-
I stopped believing.
On what basis?
See, this is getting dangerous for the raging atheist here, because he said he stopped believing. That's not a bad thing to say. He's no longer convinced. But what Darth here believes, because Darth does not understand, and I've had to mention this many times, he does not understand the concept of doxastic involuntarism. He wants to know, okay, you quit believing. What led you to that decision? And usually it's not one thing. Like, Darth approaches this kind of stuff like, for years I used to drive Chevys, and I thought that the Chevrolet, anything that Chevrolet could not be beat. They were the best vehicles going. And then I was talking to a person who was an Audi mechanic, let's say. And this guy loved Audis. And he said, these are the best engineered vehicles on the road. And they're so much better than, GM cars in general, but they're much better than Chevrolet. And what you need to do is go out and get an Audi. And so I did the research and I looked into it. And you know what? I found out that in a way, objectively, he was right. Audis were better, and they were expensive, but they were better engineered vehicles in certain ways. So now I only buy Audis. That's not what's happening here. That's not like, this is the kind of question that you ask somebody like, well, so you went out shopping for religions, and what brought you to Mormonism? Like, it's not like that. It's not like he's like doing the Pepsi taste test, with religion here. That's oftentimes you get enough information coming from other sources that it starts to erode your confidence in what you believe. You might still be inclined to want to think it's true. This is something that Darth is not charitable about. There are lots of atheists out there that are like, no, I actually kind of like it. I'll admit, I still like the idea of Sunday morning worship service and going to a church and meeting fellow churchgoers. And I mean, especially if it's, a beautiful building and it's a beautiful day, you get to spend time with people. There's a sense of community. All that stuff is great. I like that stuff. And part of me wishes that, whatever it would take, I would feel like an imposter if I were there just for those things, when I know that I don't actually, I'm not part of the gang. But this idea that, and there's nothing that I can really do about that. Now, it might happen that I'm exposed to enough theology or new religious input or something over time that then that talks me into it. Maybe I start feeling myself becoming more confident in a different way. But at this stage in my life, I was a Christian, and then I heard more and more arguments against it that raised my doubts. Things like the problem of evil, specifically gratuitous evil, that started to erode my confidence in the type of theological stances that I had. So whether or not there's a God or not, I'm not really all that committed to. I don't really care, but I'm definitely not a Christian, and I don't believe in a lot of Christian theology. So. Hey, Knock, good to see you. This is why I don't dig philosophy. Yeah, good to see you. Well, it doesn't matter, because in this conversation, he's not asking good questions.
Because I stopped. I mean, it doesn't matter what I say. I can give you whatever reason. It's not going to be good enough for you.
Well, if I can
really
interject, I want to interject here. Sorry, I just need to interject. Rage already said earlier that one of the reasons he had for rejecting God was that when he was in prison, surrounded by other prisoners who also claimed to be believers in God or Christians, and even though they did that, they were just as bad or worse than he was, and why he was there. And so that was one of his reasons for rejecting the existence of God. I think you should ask him about other reasons other than that. That would explain.
That's a pretty good one, though, because now he's actually gotten it right. But that's a good one. It really is. If especially if you're one of these people that got the evangelical line, like, well, if you give your heart over to Jesus and you accept the Holy Spirit into your heart, the Holy Spirit will make you a better person. And then you're surrounded by people who are all like, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. Yeah, I'm born again. Like, what are you in here for? Multiple counts of rape. Like, okay, Holy Spirit is sounding a little less persuasive now, because it doesn't seem to like really regenerate you in a way that prevented you from like, how long have you been a Christian again? Like just like 5 minutes? Like, no, 15 years. Like, when did you get arrested? 6 years ago. Holy shit.
Why he
has no-
rejected God.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking,
unanswered prayers, right? Like,
that's a
God
non
never.
sequitur.
Well, I'm sure it is, but like you're asking for my reasons and they're mine. I don't know how to
No,
give you
but it's
anything that's not my
that's a
reason.
non sequitur. It doesn't
If-
follow that. It doesn't.
You want
follow.
me to be a philosopher when I'm not, Darth? That's always
Okay,
been the
well,
issue.
listen to me. I'm not asking you to be a philosopher. I'm asking you a very simple and basic question. What is
Fenton, I don't get the Darth interest. How many people does he influence? I think he influence. I mean, he does have an influence on all of us. I mean, in a way, right? Because I think listening to these kinds of bad questions and sort of like the lack of charity and the way he talks with people, and the slew of possible like personal and character defects that he's got on display at all times, has an influence on us, at least when we highlight it, because we kind of see. To me, he's an example of what happens if you've got like a strong combination of undiagnosed mental health issues and lots of theology. And it doesn't really matter if it's good or bad. Darth tries to present himself as having like ultimate answers, like the definitive answers to philosophical questions and biblical questions and science questions. Like, he's got the answers to all of these issues. Because God, and almost all of it he's gleaned from theological sources that have just basically like frapped his mind. And the reason I think he clings to them is because that sense of certainty gives him a feeling of superiority. Now, granted, I am just speculating and psychologizing gratuitously here, but that does have an influence on us, because we watch him and just like, holy shit, what is wrong with this guy? But this kind of dialectic that he presents influences specifically a lot of other young men that look at this as a tactic that they can use to get over on people. They can use this to like not win over people, but like what they'll do is they'll convince people that they're right. They're not interested in persuasion. They're interested in dominance. Like, I don't care that, it doesn't matter that you agree with me. What matters is that you submit to me, and that I may put this person in their place and make them yield and kick them and mute them and make them go away. That appeals to a lot. I think a lot of the younger men that listen to him, especially if they're inclined to the same kinds of theology, because it's an easy layup. And then they can claim that they're doing something strong in the faith. There's a lot of like confirmation bias going on in here. So yeah, I think that's part of the interest. I think for me, he demonstrates a living example of a lot of toxic elements of American culture, specifically between evangelical Christianity, kind of conservative, just sort of knee-jerk conservative politics, not even necessarily like, I don't think that he's got a political bent. A lot of the stuff that he spews is like old rhetoric from the Reagan administration. I mean, he thinks that social welfare is a problem because there's too many people cheating it. Like, I mean, he actually believes that crap. When none of this is true anymore, he's just got a head full of a lot of bad ideas. And if you internalize them long enough, you get Darth. This is a good one. I don't have a bigoted, puffed up, pseudo-intellectual uncle like many people do, so I watch Darth videos to fill that void in my life. Yeah, exactly. If your Thanksgivings are free of drama, when people say like, oh, he's that uncle or that aunt at the table on Thanksgiving, and you're just like, I don't know what that's like, tune into Darth Dawkins. That's what that's like.
It's the rational, non-arbitrary basis for your declaration that there is no God. Now, you are quite an outspoken
Well, tell me yours
atheist,
for
okay?
why there is a God.
I'll be glad to get to it, but in that request that you just make, are you conceding on YouTube that you don't have a rational defense for your not Godism?
I guess that's what I've done. I don't, maybe, sure.
Oh, okay. So
he already provided it. So Darth's asking a pointless question. He already provided a rationale. He was in prison, surrounded by people who claimed to be Christians who were bad. Darth may not agree with the reason, and he may not agree with the rationale, but denying the existence of a rationale after Knock has provided it doesn't. Knock is a raging atheist, guys. That doesn't make any sense. That's just completely dishonest. He's not listening.
So you're the raging atheist. You do it.
It's kind of implied in the name, I think, right?
Right. So you don't have a clear, unambiguous, rational defense.
I don't have a degree in philosophy. I haven't.
No,
I'm trying to dig into logic. I'm really trying to learn, Darth. I'm not ready for you yet.
Evasive. You're being evasive. I'm not being philosophical.
I'm still a grasshopper, and you're a master.
It's a good technique from Rage. Just trying to butter him up a little bit. Yeah, Darth doesn't think that he's using philosophy here. He's had discussions with people who try to like get away from like just talk about it from like a psychological perspective, and he'll just tap out, because then he'll just claim that it's meaningless, which is interesting. Because for him, I really do think this guy he might be more empty than he actually lets on. I don't think he understands like the distinction between like, you don't have a personality. It's stuff that filled you up. You don't have opinions or beliefs outside of the things that you either correctly collected or incorrectly gathered. And you need to get rid of the ones that are wrong and only keep the ones that are right. And if these things have been determined to be right by some kind of source, some authority, like a Bible, church, God, whatever, then by definition, you have the right things, and then you're okay. But by this, I mean, if you think about the fact that if somebody says, look, we can talk about whether or not I've got a syllogism that a valid syllogism that argues against the existence of God, or I've got a good philosophical rationale against it. That still doesn't get us any closer to the fact that psychologically, I'm still not inclined to believe. I'm disinclined to believe in your God specifically. And how do I get past that part? How do I get over that psychological block? I'm just not convinced. Now, you might say, oh, you've been convinced by poor things, or you've been convinced by, like, okay, well, then you're going to have to lay out better evidence. But Darth's idea about this is like, oh, well, the reason that you're not convinced is because you simply haven't chosen to believe the right things. That's not a possibility. That's just not it. That's not how belief works. That's not how brains work. That's not how the psychological. And when you bring up that psychological aspect of it, he will tap out. No, then we're not talking about anything. I just want it to be one or the other. You either believe in God or you don't believe in God. And this one's right and this one's wrong. And that's it. That's all you need. Like, you're convinced that's what you need. Why do you feel that that's what you need? I mean, Darth doesn't really understand that we're not entirely rational. We're not completely rational in the sense that he likes to think, that we just look at options and then simply select the best one. And then if you don't, you deserve to be ridiculed for it. That's not exactly how humans work. And he doesn't, not only, it'd be one thing if he doesn't get that. Plenty of people don't entirely understand that. That's not a problem. The problem is he actively rejects it. And if somebody brings up this aspect of it in the discussion, he blows it off. He acts like it's totally irrelevant. All I want to talk about are the things you select, the things you shop for, what you bought. This really is no different, as far as I'm concerned, than Darth yelling at somebody for buying a Ford when they should have bought a Ram truck. And he just doesn't understand. Like, what was your rationale for purchasing a Ford truck? You piece of shit. And then he goes in and they're like, well, this particular one said Raptor on the side. Oh, that's the only it doesn't follow that because it says Raptor on the tailgate, that's the reason that you bought the truck. Like, sorry. I'm getting into vehicles again. I don't know why. It's Saturday. I'm thinking about washing my car. Sorry, folks.
Well, I'm not speaking in philosophy speak. I'm not being
so I'm trying to be real with you and give my real reasons, but then you want me to
you haven't given me a substantive reason so far as to why there's no God, have you?
Well, all right. I've tried to in the past. So another reason, like I know TTUR, you're probably at least interested.
Well, I mean, today, have you given me a substantive defense why there's no
I
God?
just stopped believing. I lost that belief.
I know you told me that. I asked you a question. See, what happens when I talk with atheists?
It's been a long time since.
Why are you ever talking to me? May I finish, please?
I do apologize, sir.
When I talk with atheists, they frequently, as a tactic, ignore my question and then pretend like they're answering it. Have you given so far a substantive explanation how you determine there's no God?
No, that's not. Oh my God, he's doing it again. What's this? How did you select that belief? He didn't. Like, he's completely moved things over. John May, Rage discombobulates Darth so much without even trying. It's hilarious. It really is, because Rage isn't trying to have this kind of like, and I think that's why. I think because Rage is willing to kind of be like, you know what, I'll concede that I think you know more about these kinds of philosophical stances than I do. And Darth doesn't care. Darth is like, no, don't you try to be agreeable with me. I'm going to trap you in this rhetorically, and I'm going to show you the error of your ways. Like, that's not going to work, because Darth thinks that this is about picking beliefs. He thinks it's about making the correct purchase. Like, I can only imagine. I wonder if he's like this with people who have Android phones. You know, if you like walk up to him and, you know, you're talking to him on the street and you pull out you've got a Google Pixel in your hand, and does he just slap it out of your hand and accuse you of heresy because he's selected Apple as the superior product and you can't provide him a definitive reason as to why the Pixel phone is worth your time? Like, this just seems like this. Like, you made a poor choice in not accepting God, and I'm telling you, God is the only brand worth purchasing. What is your reason for rejecting it? Like, I don't believe in it. I don't think that it's real. I think that you're talking about something that is made up. And unless you can demonstrate something that gives me reason to kind of question that, you know, that skepticism, and I start maybe thinking, okay, well, maybe it's more than a possibility. Maybe it's a likelihood. Maybe, and even if you do that, it's not going to be sufficient for Darth. Darth doesn't want you to accept that it's a possibility. He wants you to accept that it's a certainty, that it's a necessity. So even the degree to which he needs you to agree with him isn't going to be there. Thank you very much for the super chat. Flame, he's defined into existence that you have to disbelieve in God, then ask how you determine that you're right about that. He won't listen. Yeah. Yep. And everything about your beliefs, everything is about it's about consciously choosing one or the other. Now, to be fair, and I'd be interested in hearing this from anybody who's got more information on psychology than I do. Like this, Steve Jobs goes, revealed to me that Apple is better. Well, there you go. It's from a supernatural source. It can't be wrong. I'm wondering if there's something about Darth's internal life, like whatever's going on in his head, that makes it incapable for him to think that any like, I don't know exactly how this works. My understanding is that most people's brains work in a way that you're exposed to things and you become convinced over time. It's not necessarily a conscious decision. I really get the impression that Darth is not capable of understanding that. And not only that, but not really even capable of relating to it. And that might be the real disconnect between him and everyone that he talks to. And I'm wondering if there is a psychological condition out there where someone has that kind of internal life, where they really can't. I mean, I think it could just be a total, like a deep lack of empathy. But I'm wondering if there's something maybe more there, like a processing kind of thing.
Not for you, I haven't.
No, I didn't ask for me. Have you presented a substantive basis why there's no God?
I don't think I've intended to try to do that.
Okay, so you don't have a rational basis then that there's no God?
I don't know. I'll think about it.
So wait a minute. You've been on YouTube for years proclaiming you're atheist. You beat up on people on your show. Okay. No.
Shame on you, Rage. You've beaten up people. To hear Darth Dawkins chide someone like Rage for rhetorically beating up on people. Oh my Lord. Oh God.
ranting about your atheism, that there's no reason to believe in God. Do you have a reason, a cogent reason right now, how you determine there is no God?
He hasn't determined that there isn't one. He's given a rationale for why he doesn't believe in one. This is a switch. And now, what would be fascinating now, because I've looked at some of Knock's comments in here, if Knock then attempts to say, because it sounds like what Knock has experienced in sort of a change of mind is a subjective experience, and a lot of people have had them religiously. My experience with good old Darthy Poo here is that Darth rejects that stuff. I think people have asked him about his subjective experience, and I think he said he's never had one. It's not about like feeling like God came to you. It's not like feeling like the Holy Spirit moved within you and changed your heart. He does talk about people realizing that they're disgusting, diabolical, depraved pieces of shit, dropping to their knees and crying out, oh, have mercy on me, essentially submitting to God's, great big muscular fist or something. Embellishment mine. But I always picture that Darth's version of God is, quite beefy. And diesel. Why he would then go on to then he doesn't equate that, I think, with a subjective experience. I think he equates that with like a rational one. He realized he's a piece of crap, or that he needs help, or that everything's crappy, like everything's terrible, and then made the assumption like there needs to be a God to take care of this stuff and to punish the people that I hate and to reward me for hating the people that are hateable, because surely those are the ones that all need to burn in the fire. I think that really is just about it for him. So I think it would be fascinating to see the two of them talk now, to see Rage say, well, no, this is kind of what I think. And it's a subjective experience. And I don't know if Rage would describe it in any kind of language like Darth would say, like it was this a come to Jesus moment, which you were beaten down. You realize you're scum. You're totally, I mean, it's one thing to be hopeless. It's another thing to be completely self-loathing. And Darth is usually an unhealthy combination of the two. And that's the point you get to. And that's when you realize you need God. And then after that, you can be a pretentious, condescending, arrogant, self-righteous prig for the rest of your life because you were a scumbag, but Jesus got your back. And he has no internal he has no conscious experience of this. No, there was no subjective experience that he ever had to rely on. I don't think he has a testimony. That's weird, because wherever Knock goes, wherever Rage goes, in his in wherever his mind goes, wherever his where he feels like his belief system is going to end up changing to, whatever faith tradition he might get drawn into, or religious dogma that he might get attracted to. Maybe he rejects all religious dogma, but he still stays kind of committed to an idea of a higher power, or maybe a pantheistic kind of belief kind of thing. Maybe that's what he clings to. But he has a testimony, and Darth doesn't. And I find that hilarious.
I don't have a belief for God, so I don't I just don't understand what you're asking of me. What do you want?
Why
me
are
to
you
give
so
you
confused? Atheism is the position. If you look at the literature,
why I think you're the one that's like confused by a lot of atheists.
I'm not confused. I'm not confused by anything. In fact, I've done quite an extensive study, not only of atheism, but of the definitions of atheism. Now, are you trying to maintain right here that your atheism does not constitute the outright denial of the existence of God?
Does not constitute the outright denial of the existence of God. No, I think I outright deny the existence of God.
Okay, can you please tell me rationally why there's no God?
Because I don't see one in my reality.
You're repeating the same claim in different words.
Claim. I know. Okay.
I mean, if you want to dispute that,
I don't hear one. I don't feel one. I don't see any impact of one.
okay.
I don't see one in physical form, spiritual form.
There are plenty of things that you believe in that you cannot see. Do you believe in the uniformity of nature?
I don't entirely. At least not in the way that he's describing it. J.L. Warren says, all of this could be reinforced by the fact that he's emboldened by internet anonymity. In person, he would never behave in this fashion. Yeah, it sounds like he might be that he probably is a lot calmer. And I also, the fact that he has to be calmer in real life probably leads to the fact that because he has internet anonymity, this is an opportunity for him to really get that rage out, because he had to, I have a feeling that interpersonal relationships in the real world, face to face, for Darth Dawkins, it's like constantly having to hold in not just the fart, but like, what do they call that? Fire snake diarrhea kind of thing, where, I mean, it's just like screaming inside them. And, the only thing that they're looking forward to is when they can get home and just expel all of that stuff. And that's what this is. It's,
Well, of course you do, but you can't see the uniformity of nature. You may see certain repeated events that you will attribute to the uniformity of nature.
Can't see
So,
gravity.
so not seeing or hearing God, it
Sure.
doesn't follow from that logically that there's no God.
But God speaks to so many people. It doesn't speak to me. It doesn't give me any feeling.
Okay,
I'm
I'm
void of that
waiting.
feeling.
I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but you are
I'm an
somewhat
atheist
popular.
that expresses that I'm an atheist, and
Okay,
you want me
right,
to
right.
like express
Do you have
who I
okay?
am to you.
Darth is not picking up what Rage is putting down. JL says you could classify that as an empathy disorder. It could also fall within the various thresholds of ASPD and its multitude of presentations. It's probably why he gets so mad when he gets analyzed. Yeah. And I think that's part of what I mean, because I can kind of understand the psychological reactions to it. Because I've known people similar to Darth, nowhere near as bad. But then again, they're probably not behaving. Actually, who knows with the internet? They're probably worse. But there was actually a comment back here that I was trying to find, but I can't remember it. I think I missed a comment that I wanted to highlight. Is anyone prevaricating or rabbit trailing it? He hasn't accused Rage of that. I think he's just trying to he's accusing Rage of not making the correct selection at the store. Because you could have picked up a God, but you pretended that it didn't exist, and so now you went home. Then you went home with nothing. I think this might have been, if an asteroid smashes into our planet and removes a quarter of the crust, I would dare say the uniformity of our nature has changed. Yeah, and it would be one of those things where Darth would probably say, yeah, but the physical possibility of an asteroid hitting our planet was possible. It wasn't something else. The uniformity of nature thing always, when he brings that up, it always brings into question like, oh, do I believe in the uniformity of nature? You mean like a man walking on water? Or feeding a multitude of people with just a few loaves and fish? That kind of uniformity of nature? And then, all right, there you go. You're banned. You're muted. Like, I'm sorry. There's nothing better than trolling somebody like Darth with the Bible.
Do you require a rational basis or a reason to believe in God?
I just require a lack of belief.
No, you're not. You got to focus on what I'm saying to you. Do you require a reason to believe in God?
I don't need a reason.
You probably would need reasons to. I mean, whether or not you need reasons to believe it, you get reasons, and then you're convinced of it after like this stuff builds up over time. He really doesn't get this. Yeah, and I wonder if somebody maybe pointed. I know people have pointed this out, and he mispronounced it in a video that I read. Doxastic. He couldn't even say doxastic involuntarism. I think he called it doxastic. And I think it's weird that like this keeps bypassing him. Like, do you need a reason to believe in God? I think most people would need a reason to believe in a God, but most people have those reasons embedded in their lives. They're sort of unchallenged or unspoken in a lot of cases. What was my reason for being a Christian? I was raised by parents who went to church and who were Christian, and I was surrounded. All the adults in my life were their friends. And they were all Christian, and all their kids were ostensibly Christian. So everybody that I grew up with and talked to, all of them just assumed the reality of the existence of the God of the Christian Bible. That's a good reason to believe in God when everyone you know and talk to assumes that it's true. Is that a good reason for believing it? Probably not. But it is a reason.
reason to believe or not believe in God. I don't have a belief.
Okay. You mean you just woke up one day like in a state of amnesia and you were missing a belief?
I just woke up
Holy
one day
shit.
and
Holy shit. Does Darth not think that can happen?
I don't even think it was.
And you were missing. Okay. You mean you just woke up one day like in a state of amnesia and you were missing a belief?
You can literally. Has the man never had an epiphany? This is remarkably telling. I'm glad I reviewed this. Holy shit. Yes, you can wake up one morning. I can't count how many times I've either heard an argument or seen a presentation or seen a documentary, and then a day or two later I could be cooking dinner, in the shower, walking a dog, and all of a sudden, bam, change of perspective, change of position on a topic. It's happened tons of times. There's actually a method. I can't remember the book, where a guy encourages people to do this for creative purposes. He's like, this is what you do. You want to, it's an advertising book from like the 60s. And he's like, here's what you do. You want to create an ad about something. Read up about it as much as you can, and then read up about what you think your idea about the ad should be. Read up on all the surrounding stuff. Really bury yourself into it. Do that, pretty intensely for, however long, and then drop it. Leave it alone. Get away from it and stop doing anything with it. Take a vacation from it for like 2 or 3 days and let it cook. And then wait and see what occurs to you in a week without dwelling on it. After you've spent the time researching and looking into it and looking at examples and poring over artwork, and then see what pops up in your head after it kind of coalesces. This is something our brains do. This is something that advertising people, well, this one particular advertising guy understood how the brain worked back in the 60s. And this has bypassed Darth, apparently. Holy shit. Sorry for fixating on that, but that is an incredible, you just woke up one day and you were missing a belief. Like, hear him talk about beliefs. It's like, oh yeah, somebody took my toy. Like a belief for Darth seems to just be a fact. Somebody removed a fact of the world away from him. Not something that you're convinced is true. Holy fucking shit. God's allowed to break his own rules, and the only thing God can't do is lie, unless God decides to lie, because that wouldn't be a disruption. Even when God lies, God isn't lying. Sure, I think you got it.
I just woke up one day and I don't even think it was one day. I think it was a course of many days that I just stopped believing.
Okay, so you've have you decided that there's no God, or is your not God?
I didn't mean to imply that I was doing all those things at the same time, but now that you've mentioned it, Adam, I kind of want to try now. Everything about that would be disgusting, though.
I don't know. Darth, you missed. I just recently had this whole I don't know, maybe. It's maybe, maybe there's something, I don't know. Who am I to say?
You're no longer an atheist?
No, I'm still pretty much an atheist.
Well, an atheist is somebody who says there are no gods.
Yeah, no, I had that moment, but then I'm like, yeah, no, fuck it, there's nothing.
Okay, can you please tell me rationally why there's no God?
Right back to where we started.
Because you haven't told me so far. You haven't given me a rational basis.
So you're a Christian, right? So I can give you I think I can give you a rational basis.
I'm waiting for you to tell me why there is no creator, eternal creator God.
Ah, changed it again. Why there's no eternal creator God? You mean like Yahweh? Allah? I love this. No. I want you to tell me why there isn't an ultimate being. So he's just moved this again. He's just shifted this over. Why are you an atheist? Well, because of this. Not good enough. You need to tell me why it's not possible for a God exists. Okay, you're a Christian, right? I need you to tell me why an ultimate creator being, a creator being, doesn't exist. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Not a Christian God.
I'm waiting for you to tell me the rational basis for your atheism. Can you do that, please?
Already did it. Asked and answered. That's not the same thing. This really is it. This really is it. Beliefs are facts, and facts are beliefs. You can't believe something unless it's true.
I don't know. I don't believe in Harry Potter either.
Okay, can you give me the rational basis why there is no ultimate creator God?
Santa Claus, you know, I figured out Santa was fake, so it was just a matter of time.
Okay. Okay. Well, you understand we have good reasons to
I'm sure you
believe
do.
Santa Claus. Okay, we have good reasons to believe that Santa Claus does not exist.
I gotta hand it to Rage here. First of all, this takes some patience, and second of all, I don't know what about this conversation. Like, I'm pretty sure I think that Darth really likes these ones because Rage isn't trying to like give him an angle on something. I think that's what usually a lot of people want to do. Like, okay, this dude's coming at me, and Taylor Hicks wants to trap me. you know. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dodge his question, and I'm gonna throw a trap at him. And Darth is good at spotting that kind of stuff because he doesn't want that shit. That sounds like Jack Angstrike from days of yore, and he'll just flip out and ban you because he doesn't want to deal with that. But Rage is basically just like, nah, yeah, no, yeah, whatever. And so, and then offering up like, yeah, I don't believe in Santa Claus either. Darth loves this stuff. He claims he hates it, but he loves it because if somebody uses that, and I think there's a strong way to actually bring up the idea, like, hey, in the same way that I am unconvinced of something like Santa Claus, that's sort of the same way psychologically I lack conviction in the belief in a God. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And Darth here will then lean into this.
Right. So, for example, if Santa Claus did exist, what we would expect to find are reports from parents all over the world that there were presents underneath the Christmas tree for which they had no explanation for. But we don't even have any instances of this. So we have excellent reasons to believe that Santa Claus does not exist.
Okay. By that logic, we have no evidence of anyone rising from the dead. So therefore, there's no Jesus. And therefore, that calls into question, as Darth puts it, God's redemptive plan for humanity and throughout human history. And therefore, there's no God. We have good reason not to believe that in the Christian God because there's no resurrection.
Do you have a good reason why God does not exist?
I mean, what are your reasons why God exists?
Okay. Notice. I want the audience to pay very close attention. Here is an outspoken, very motivated YouTube atheist, and he is deflecting here. I'm waiting for you to explain, and I'm being very polite with you. I'm trying. I'm not mistreating you. I want you to explain, but so far you've just dodged. I want you to explain right now. Can I finish, please? I want you to explain to me rationally how you determine there is no creator God. How did you determine that?
Let me think about it. Because I can't see all of the universe, so I can't. I don't know. I don't know. Darth, you've stumped me. You got me.
So you don't have a wait a minute. You've been doing this for years.
I've been myself.
Can you do me a favor? Can you do me a favor? When I'm responding to you, can you not cut me off and interrupt me?
I can try. I can't promise you.
Right. Now, I've asked you multiple times. I've been very reasonable about this.
Cool.
Right. I haven't cut you off. And I'm asking the same question that you have yet to answer. Do you have a logical, rational basis of how you've decided there is no God?
Yes.
What is it?
It's indescribable.
I'm waiting for a rational explanation.
I can't put words to my explanation for I don't believe in God.
So you don't have a rational basis that you can share with us?
Well, to me,
he already gave it. Jesus, like, See, and this is a thing. This is fascinating because if you talk to somebody who hasn't really come up in any churches, or even if maybe they were kind of casually acquainted with church attendance when they were a kid or something like that, you're going to run into people that are not, you could just ask somebody, what are you inclined to think is true, that there is a God or there isn't? And you're probably going to run into a decent mix of people who think that there might be. You'll kind of get the usual, yeah, I think there might be a higher power. Like, who knows? I think that's going to be kind of, people are going to kind of put a pin in that. Outside of that, right? And I don't know that, I don't know how Darth would deal with that kind of a casual question. I don't know that I've ever really seen him do that. But the opposite is true in this kind of case, where if you run across somebody who's just not convinced at all, you're like, no, I'm not inclined to think that there's a higher power. And then Darth goes in on the attack. The interesting thing here is that compare the way he's treating Rage here with the way he treated Warren or Mac Gruber. When Mac started getting kind of convinced of not necessarily Christianity per se, but the belief in a God, he claimed he was getting convinced because of this dialectic, because of this Darth Dawkins kind of apologetic. So he gets involved in this. He starts listening to this more and more and more. So then you essentially get two different things. Rage is basically saying, I haven't seen anything that really makes me convinced that there actually is a God. I'm disinclined to believe. And Warren is like, no, I'm inclined to believe there is at least some kind of theistic deity. I'm inclined to believe that that's true because I've heard this apologetic, and it sounds like these atheist types out there, they really can't ground certain things. They really don't have an account for this. And I think the theists do. Was that enough for Darth? No. And where did he go? Rage needs to provide Darth with a knockdown, definitive, rational, and possibly empirical refutation of the possibility of the existence of an ultimate disembodied mind capable of creating absolutely everything. Warren, or Matt Gruber, simply had to have the fall down to his knees moment where he repents and gives his life over to Jesus. Kind of weird, right? So, two different takes, not inclined to believe, inclined to believe, and Darth needs them to take the next step. All Rage needs to do is prove something that philosophy can't, and probably never will. Science probably certainly can't, because that's not what science is set up for. It's not really a falsifiable thing, at least not in the way that Darth is doing it. But he needs that done, rationally, empirically, whatever. You need to give me knockdown, drag out, incontrovertible, indisputable proof there's no God. Otherwise, you don't have a reason to not believe in it, which is basically just appealing to ignorance, because it could be a possibility. And if it's a possibility, maybe it's definitely a likelihood, if that makes sense. But Warren being kind of inclined to think that, no, I think I like your apologetics. Oh, yeah? Well, have you dropped to your knees, turd, and begged God to not kill you? Begged Jesus to save you? And I remember a conversation where Mac was like, no, I don't know that I've actually gotten to the whole altar call point yet. And he's like, well, let's say that you're driving along on the road and you get hit into a car accident. You think you're going to heaven or hell? That'll chestnut. So Warren needed something. It's weird that Darth would kind of appeal to something very, very close to a subjective experience, a subjective religious experience. That was the thing that Warren was lacking, even though Warren was rationally conceding to every point that Darth's making in an apologetic sense. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, to me, it's quite rational. It's just I have a hard time expressing it to you because I don't know what answer you want. I probably should. Since I probably should have kept up on you, but I don't know. I've been trying.
Hey, Mark Reed. He writes, Darth asks for epistemology, then switches it to some sort of ontology halfway through. Yeah, yep, always. By the way, Mark Reed, I think I owe you an apology, too, for kind of butting in. I'd had some drinks and joined in on that discussion that you were having on the modern day debate Discord thing. And I do apologize if I was being a dick or if I think I was annoying you. So apologies for that. I've been... After that, it was gone, and you guys continued on with a pretty good discussion afterwards. So, but I wanted to say I'm sorry anyway. Should have joined in. I think I was more of a distraction than anything else. All right.
Trying to figure out philosophy on my own, not trying to figure out how to combat.
Wait a minute. You're on YouTube for several years, whining and complaining about people's conduct.
I've been on
Okay.
YouTube being myself for about 5 years now.
Right. So the point is, in a world without God, which is your perspective, why are you complaining about any other events when there's nothing identifiable which dictates events? Why are you complaining about events when there's nothing that dictates events in your view?
I don't know. Real quick, Ivan, I'm refusing to look at your chats. I'm not gonna like. I don't really care about answering correctly for Darth. But all right, so repeat that again, Darth.
Well, in addition to your vocal atheism, in all the times that I've listened to you, and even the times that I've talked with you, I have never heard you once give a basic, rational explanation why there's no God, and I'm waiting for one.
Okay, I don't know that, you know, that's not owed to Darth. It's funny the way he puts that out there, like, well, this needs to come. My experience with Rage's channel over the years, and I've known him for a while, has been that, you know, he usually, and Rage and I disagreed about certain things, you know, either between philosophy and certain things about the Bible even. You know, Rage would take the stance that the Bible is, you know, kind of an idiotic book filled with crazy stories and all this kind of stuff. I don't think that it's idiotic. I think it's idiotic for somebody to try to take it literally and try to treat it like a manual, definitely. And I think Rage and I would completely agree. But I think to kind of throw the whole thing out and say that it doesn't have any, you know, that it's just, you know, ignorant and made by ignorant goat herders or whatever. Like, I got in trouble for that, I think, from like Smokey Saint was just bashing him for that for a while. I mean, but that's his opinion. I mean, if your opinion is that you think that it, you know, it's one of those things that's just overrated. Yeah. I mean, go for it. I mean, you know, there are plenty of people that hate, you know, lots of different cultural art, you know, just don't appreciate it or don't care for it. And if that's the case, great. But this idea that, like, okay, for Rage's channel, you as an atheist should have put out an argument that there is no God. What if Knock did? I think this is maybe somebody we ought to coordinate, like anybody that's kind of affiliated with us or wants to kind of do this. If you have a channel on YouTube and you're kind of halfway devoted to talking about like the great debate, God versus no God kind of discussions, you have to have a valid syllogism for the non-existence of God in your description, just to cover. And then when somebody like Darth shows up, I'm like, well, I haven't seen it, and that's right there, and I've got an argument right there. So if you're a rationalist, that should provide you some good evidence. Well, what's your empirical? Like, well, hang on now, you know, but it'd give you something. It'd give you a little bit of a take. But Rage doesn't have to do that with his channel. Nobody has to do that with his channel. And most of the stuff that Rage would usually focus on is the behavior of certain people, usually the behavior of Christians, believers, the way that they would criticize people, or the way that they would abuse each other. That was more the content of this. Again, this is Darth just not being able to keep up with the fact that, like, a person can state they're not inclined to believe in God as a psychological state. It's a level of conviction thing. It's not based on their acceptance of a logical syllogism or something.
Well, I mean, I've given you what I considered it to be. You know,
what
like,
was that?
I don't consider God to be necessary.
How did you determine that?
For the planet to exist, for the universe to exist. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. How did you determine that it is necessary?
Okay. Now, when you say,
you want to ask all of these questions of me, but I never get to ask any questions of you.
Well, I'll be glad to answer your questions.
But you say that every time.
Yeah.
I've never gotten an answer.
In
fact, he's cutting him off now. He's like, yeah, you say this every time, but I never get an answer. And he's already trying to interrupt him. Like, oh, I'll answer your questions just as soon as we get done with it. No one ever gets done with their interrogation with Darth.
That's
I've at least given answers to you, because
are you going to go? Are you going to go into bickering mode?
Well, I mean, kind of. I feel like throwing a tantrum right now.
The issue is not that I.
Okay, I gotta hand it to Rage for that one. I'm gonna remember that. I might steal that, Rage. Yeah, I kind of feel like throwing a tantrum right now. Jesus.
The issue is not that I don't like your answers. So far, by your own concession, You haven't given a rational basis why there's no God. To sit there and say you've given me answers, but I don't like them. I'm talking right now. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. I was.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Like Darth, you've been talking for quite a bit. It's time to give up the mic, there, old man. Brick with Isaac wrote, there are great syllogism against the Abrahamic gods, but Darth just goes to a deist god. Exactly. So if you put out one that's like, okay, like a kind of a logical problem with evil thing, it'll just be like, I'm not talking about the Bible. It's like, well, okay, that's not necessarily the God of the Bible. That's just a God with omni qualities. No, I'm just talking about a disembodied mind that's ultimate. Oh, okay. And when he's gone up against people that are a little bit that are kind of keen on this kind of the metaphysical aspect of it, King Xerxes did this, which reminds me, I got to do a video about him. King Xerxes and Pine Creek had a conversation that is just, oh god, it's gross. But I'm waiting to see if I can get somebody to join me for that one. But Xerxes, despite my disagreements with him about almost everything politically, savvy as a counter apologist, and he kind of took him to task on that front. This idea of kind of shifting, just constantly moving it back and back and back. It's okay. You believe in the Christian God, right? I'm not talking about the Christian God. I'm talking about, the God of classical theology. Okay, so classical theism, which means an omni God. And then if you give him like the logical problem of evil, he doesn't think not only does he not think it's sound, which is fine, but I think Darth has denied that some of the logical problems of evil, the syllogisms, are not invalid. It's like, no, they're valid. The structure is fine. And then if you try to point that out again, no, I'm just talking about a creator God that's an ultimate mind. Like, all right, well, we'll just wind this back to there's a thing that's necessary to create all the other things. Prove me wrong. Can't. Don't know what the things are. I don't know. The first thing is I don't know what you're doing.
Talking. I'd like to finish.
I apologize.
Okay. Now, I have repeatedly asked you, what is the rational, logical basis why there's no God? You've told me that you have.
No, you first asked him what his rational basis was for not believing in God, what his rationality was for his atheism. And then it switched to, you wanted his rationality for why there isn't a God. Constantly switching back and forth between this. I mean, Darth is like this T-Tor guy, and Brett should both have pointed this out. They both should have caught this. You asked for a rationale for his disbelief, and he gave it to you. Now you're asking him to provide an explanation for why it's impossible for the God you're defining to exist. And if you do this to Darth, he will take his toys and go home. But Knock writes, my favorite thing Darth ever told me is, you're the type of person that invites the whole family over for Thanksgiving dinner only to get there and there is no dinner. I would say to this, Rage, leave it to Darth to use an example like this. He was promised a free meal and then he gets there and there's no food for him, so he throws a temper tantrum. Darth is the kind of guy that resents you for not giving him the meal that he expected. I expected free food and it wasn't provided to me. Mom, meatloaf.
Have given me ones, but I don't like it. Now, have you given me even one logical, rational reason why there is no God? Have you given me one?
Yes.
What is it?
I don't see it.
That's a restatement of the same claim.
Look, now he's going to go back to like, I just don't agree with that.
I know you say that, and it's
probably
true.
That?
It's probably true because you're
say I don't see God. Okay, is simply just a rehashing that God doesn't exist.
So God is not necessary for my reality.
That's a restatement of the same claim. To say God is not necessary, and please don't interrupt me.
Oh my God.
God, by definition, as a concept, right, as a conceptual being. Okay.
Yeah, agreed, Rage. This is why, please do not move to New Jersey and become a barista, because otherwise he will come to your coffee shop and horribly burn you.
Whether or not God exists, conceptually, God is defined as the necessary precondition of all things. If you assert God is not necessary, in other words, for everything else, that is the same thing as saying God doesn't exist.
Right. If we're gonna accept, like, I don't understand how he doesn't understand at this point that he's putting out a philosophical proposition that no one really has to accept. Like, I don't have to accept this definition of the deity from the jump, and it doesn't do anything to conclude anything about the reality of the world. Like, you basically say, well, we have all this stuff. There must be a God. Here's a philosophical proposition that I can throw out to you, and now you have to concede either this stuff is real. Like, what is your evidence that all these things are contingent upon God? Well, because all these things are here, and it's impossible for them to be here without something having been responsible for them. Like, okay, so your proof that all this stuff is possible is that it must have, your proof for the thing that made all this stuff is the fact that the stuff is in front of you. So you're just assuming it was made. Cool.
Now, on what rational basis do you say God is not necessary?
So now I got to figure out one for that. You're gonna give me a headache.
Yeah, if Rage didn't have a headache before, I would have been surprised. Leo asks, who the F is Susie? Justice for Susie? That was the Tom Rabbit hypothetical. Tom Rabbit walked Praise I Am through a variety of hypotheticals when Praise realized for the 7th time what a D-bag Darth Dawkins is. And he's like, Tom's like, now Praise, do you think, like, if he got mad in real life at, say, like Susie the barista, that he'd scald her, like he'd throw coffee in her face if Susie got his coffee order wrong? And Praise said yes. So I mean, they got him to speculate about a lot of other horrible things that Darth would do. I think they stopped short of him, like, flying a plane into a building or something like that. Actually, no, that might have been one of the examples. It was terrible. But yeah, Praise ran with it. He ran with it.
What rational reason? Okay. Because
are you embarrassed as a YouTube? Are you embarrassed as an atheist who's been on YouTube for years?
Really.
And I am not asking you trick questions. I'm not being philosophical.
You keep saying an atheist on YouTube, and yeah, I'm the raging atheist, and I talk about like atheism. But I'm just myself. That's what I am, man. I'm kind of.
I'm still waiting. What is the one logical, rational basis that there is no God? Can you give that to me, please?
Yeah, an ultimate being can't exist. I mean, that'd be mine, but anybody could give their own. What standard is Darth using for the term rational? Well, rational, I believe, reflects on the mind of God. So it's all just, the answer is always God. Just don't ask him if he means, like, if you ask him, like, what by God you mean the God of the Bible? No, I didn't bring up the Bible yet. So,
can you please tell me the answer you want me to give you?
I want you to give me your logical, rational basis why there is no God. Can you give that to me, please?
I don't know, man. I don't know what you want from me, and I don't know the correct answer.
Yes, you do. Okay, well, first of all, you're now lying to me and to the audience when you say you don't know what you want, what I want from you. I have told you in very clear terms, I would like for you to give me a brief, logical, rational basis how you determine there is no God.
A rational basis? What is he talking about? Does he want a syllogism? Does he want just kind of a pat answer? Does he just want, like, okay, the God that you're talking about is littered with contradictions. Its existence, the properties that it is said to have, if a being were to have them, would be catastrophic to its own existence. Therefore, I think it's an almost incomprehensible being, and there doesn't exist in reality. I mean, I don't know what else when Darth does this kind of stuff, like he's getting insistent on this now because maybe Darth realizes in his mind he has already gotten the answers to these questions. There's reason for this. So if you wanted to get to, like, some kind of ultimate, like, you could try to do what I'm doing and be like, try to dispute the existence of the ultimate thing. But if you wanted to appeal to, like, signs and wonders or something like that, or just basic evidence, I've been told that God should do this. That there should be changes in their believers. That the believers should be noticeably different in their capacities for compassion and love and generosity and charity than other people. Most people, most religions tend to cling to the idea that their religion and their faith tradition makes them better people. To the extent that I think that provides everyone with a sense of community, I think that can be good. But if this is supposed to be being done by, this is all supposed to be under the influence of some kind of spiritual thing like the Holy Spirit, it's good evidence that people are not being transformed in that way. If you don't see much of a difference in the way that people, people in a large D&D clan, a Dungeons and Dragons group or guild or whatever they call themselves, if they're meeting every week or every other week and they're taking care of their own and they take a collection for one of their own when they get sick and this kind of thing, there's not much difference between the community being demonstrated between that Dungeons and Dragons guild and the local, United Brethren Church. I don't know why I picked that particular denomination, but you know what I mean. You'd have to you need to see something beyond that. And if there's an absence of that evidence, it starts to raise doubt. That's enough to actually start to convince you that that's not really a thing. But that's not enough for Darth. Darth wants it. He wants a definitive. I want you to tell me why a God can't exist. That's unimportant to anything that Darth's talking about. It doesn't matter whether you could or couldn't prove that there was a God or not. Because even if you could say, like, well, I can prove that there is a God, but it's not Yahweh. It's not Jesus. He wouldn't care. He'd just gloss over that. No, we're not there yet. I want you to prove to me this. And that for whatever reason, he cannot get from this deism to Christianity. There's no reason to answer any of these questions. This is a waste of time for him. He's wasting his time. Like I could completely concede, like, no, I think maybe everything that does undergird this is some kind of ultimate being. Now what? Well, Jesus. Oh, okay. Go on. How did you? I mean, despite the fact that there's an entailment based on the God that you're talking about, there are these real philosophical entailments about how this God should behave and how it should be talking to people and how it should be comporting itself, and its description in a Bible that you believe should be taken literally. Like the God that you're describing should not experience regret, and the one in the Bible does. That's just one example. It should not be capable of evil. It takes credit for it. In Isaiah, like it doesn't confuse. It would never lie to you. It sends deceiving spirits. Like you just but that's when he'll pump the brakes and stay away from the Bible, because the Bible will lead into things that directly contradict the necessary, and I'm emphasizing this, necessary entailments from the qualities of the God that he's postulating.
You first.
Can you answer that question, being that you're the YouTube raging? I don't have a YouTube channel.
You're Darth Dawkins, man.
Okay. I don't have a YouTube channel.
You're way bigger than
I'm wearing. Okay. I'd like to know from you, do you have a rational defense of your atheism?
Yes.
Good. Could you please give it now?
I don't see it. I don't see God.
Darth stepped in it again. What's a rational defense for your atheism? Rage isn't wrong here. He could literally say, I've never met him. That is a rational defense for someone's lack of belief. It might not be a rationale that Darth appreciates. It might not be sufficient. It might be weak and flaky. But it's still a rationale. Do you believe in Jesus? Never met him. Great exchange from Ghostbusters. That's a rationale for his atheism, for his belief. But Darth keeps using atheism as if, like, no, atheism is a worldview that postulates the non-existence of this God. And the only reason that you hold to it is because it's a fact. And it can't be a fact. It can't be a fact because it's wrong. Darth has decided.
I don't feel God. I don't hear it. It doesn't register in my senses as a human being. I don't experience your God.
Okay.
That's rational to me, Darth.
Okay. Let me explain to you why it's not. Let me explain to you why it's not.
Please do. Finally.
Okay. The reason why what you just said is not rational is because you would have to defend that were a creator God to exist, you would necessarily see him. Now, can you defend that?
No, what? No. It doesn't matter that it doesn't necessarily. This is bad. Like this is one of those like certainty versus probability things. Like, well, just because God made everything, that doesn't mean that, it doesn't follow that you should be able to see him. Okay. Darth also believes that it's everything about this world has been revealed to us. I mean, his position before has always been that anybody that's taking the position Rage is taking now in this discussion, they're simply lying to themselves and they're lying to Darth. So Darth doesn't need to see God. Darth has seen God in the world around him. So I guess general revelation is enough, but it's not enough for everybody. So this is just a dumb question. There's plenty of non-believers even mentioned in the Bible that don't believe in God, that needed a little bit extra. And in the Old Testament, got it. God showed up at their camp. Or a big red hand drew something on the wall. Like, God would talk to people, sometimes through a donkey.
No.
Okay, so you just admitted that your rationale wasn't rational at all. You just contradicted yourself.
I'm not called the rational atheist.
I'm starting to wonder if maybe Rage had a little bit of the, he's smoking some trees during this conversation. This is good.
Okay. So you don't have a rational defense.
I guess not,
you.
Man.
Okay. So then what are you?
I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit tomorrow.
Are you going to quit? Are you going to quit YouTube?
Probably.
Yeah. Something makes me think that that's not true.
Maybe not. It probably won't happen.
No. So you
maybe I'll become a Christian. Maybe you convince me, Darth.
Okay.
I'll become a Christian.
No, but what's amazing is in just a few short minutes where you or your compatriots don't have the power.
Good Lord, his microphone is popping corn in this.
Or to be abusive or mods. And I've just simply asked you a simple question. Please give me a logical defense that there is no God. Do you now admit to the YouTube audience you do not have a logical, rational defense for your atheism? That your denial that God exists?
No, I have a logical, rational defense for myself.
What is it? Because so far you haven't given one.
Because I don't see it, I don't experience it.
Okay, did I not just explain to you?
He keeps explaining it, and then he keeps asking the wrong question. Like, I want an answer. You need to explain how it's impossible. Like, he's just incapable of good communication.
Non sequiturs or whatever.
Okay, do you want to dispute?
Something's fuzzy. Why are you all of a sudden so fuzzy?
Okay, so since God
doesn't want you to talk to me, I don't think.
Okay, well, my connection is clear, right?
No.
Yeah, but your mic is shit.
Now the point is this: saying I don't see God, I don't hear God, it doesn't follow from that God doesn't exist. So that is not a logical, rational defense that God doesn't exist.
Darth, your microphone's having.
I was like, is that my headphones?
It sounds like Optimus Prime underwater.
Okay, all right. Oh, I know what happened. Hold on a second. I know what happened. It switched to my headset. Give me a second here.
That's not.
All right, no problem.
Watch him disconnect himself.
Well, I hope everybody's having a wonderful day.
Okay, let me go on. Let me just go into the settings here. All right.
Oh, that's better.
Okay.
I love that subtle no from Rage.
Okay, so
this connection is clear.
So far, you have not given a defensible, rational.
Well, give me an example of a defensible, rational reason for not believing in the existence of God. I haven't looked at one recently. Like I've been reading philosophy, but not that.
I don't believe that it's logically and rationally possible to make a universal negative.
So
and sustain. May I finish?
Are you stating
you asked me a question?
No,
you asked me a question. You asked me a question, and I'm trying to answer you.
Good Lord.
You.
All right, I'm sorry.
Atheism is a universal negative.
All
right.
In a not God world. Right.
Okay.
I don't believe that it is logically and rationally possible to instantiate anything being universal in a not God world.
Why is that important? I love it when Darth does this, because they'll be like, well, in a not God world, it doesn't hold up because of the things from my worldview that I want to externally impose upon it. That's not how an internal critique is done, dingus. Like, I mean, plenty of people have talked to him about this. Leo, if you get an opportunity, well, no, Leo's probably like on his like top 10 list of people to avoid, because Leo has shredded this guy. Somebody just needs to tell him like that. Floyd tried to years ago. Like, that is not how an internal critique is done, man.
Okay.
Cool.
Atheism is a universal negative. Right?
So
It's a gift, Margaret. I mean, it really is. It's a gift. A combination of just, cluelessness, total lack of self-awareness, and shamelessness.
can I talk?
Sure.
So you're saying that there is no reason I can give you that's right?
No, what I'm saying to you so far is
Actually, that's pretty astute. And if Darth were being honest, that's true, because of what he just did. If I'm looking at a not God world, there's nothing there that would instantiate how any of this stuff would be like consistent or exist at all, or however he put it. Okay. Which means that if rage is, according to Darth, in the not God world, there's no answer that he can provide that would instantiate the possibility of all things being non-contingent from the God that Darth is imposing onto that other worldview. Coming from Darth's worldview, and he's trying to put it back on. There isn't anything that you could say. The only explanation that Darth would accept, and he does this all the time, there's a God world and there's a not God world. What is ultimate in your not God world? Well, if what is ultimate in the God world is a God, and that is necessary for all things to be, and then you turn around and say, well, in your not God world, there has to be something ultimate upon which all things are contingent. He's just put that requirement from his worldview onto your worldview, and is demanding and is pretending that that's somehow an internal critique. It's just an external critique. My worldview doesn't have a creator being. Darth's worldview has a creator being. And he's trying to say that his worldview is therefore better because his has a God that explains the existence of everything else, except for evil. And mine lacks something that explains the existence of everything. But you know what? My worldview can ground good and evil. Good and evil. Darth's can't.
In my asking you repeatedly to give a logical, rational defense of that there is no God, that is your position. You've yet to give one.
But you just told me one. You just told me your position is there is no rational, reasonable.
From my point of view, do you?
Right, and he just imposed that point of view onto his world. Like, I'm not seeing how you can get that without it. Well, why do I need to disprove the God in the Darth worldview in order to establish the possibility of the existence of all these things non-contingently from any God or creator? I could just presuppose quantum fields or Platonic forms. Darth still does not grasp this. I don't need to I do not need to say that here's my worldview and here's the things in it and here's how they beat your worldview. That's not how you need to do this. Those kinds of external critiques coming from faith traditions, you're never going to get anywhere. You want to do an internal critique. You want to go in and explore how it's inconsistent. And Darth can't get there because Darth's like, how did you create a worldview without my stuff in it? Well, because it just lacks your stuff. What does it have instead? And by the way, whatever it has instead has to be the exact equivalent of the thing that I'm complaining is missing. That would make it a God world too. Exactly. Gotcha. Like, nope, not how that's done. You lose. Go away. You're expelled. Step into my office because you're fired.
From your point of view, do you have a logical, rational basis to assert there is no God?
Yes.
What is it?
I don't see it.
Didn't I already refute that?
Probably like 20 times now.
Okay, so then what? So then why are you repeating something?
Because I don't know the answer that you want. Like, I don't know how to.
All right, I'll ask you a simple question.
Why I don't believe in something.
I'm going to ask you a simple question. In a world,
I believe in you because I hear you right now. You're here interacting with me.
Yeah. Well, you're inferring that I'm a real person. Now, the point is this.
So you're saying there's a chance Darth is fake. I knew it. I knew he was an AI.
Can you defend that in a world where there is a creator God of all things that are not himself, that you would necessarily see God? Can you defend that?
You could make that. And in his worldview, if all things come from God, then you do see God in all the things that are there. That's the problem with these two different worldviews, though. If you have people in Darth's worldview that see God's creation and don't infer God from it, that means there's something wrong with God's revelation. Because that's kind of the trick that Darth's usually trying to play. Like, okay, well, what God can do, he's kind of arguing for divine hiddenness at this point, which is kind of stupid. Well, what would be wrong with God creating all of reality and then just hiding in in some kind of atemporal dimension where you can't interact with him? But Darth, didn't you say this ultimate creator mind not only touched off this universe, but actively enervates it, actively imbues it with energy and keeps it going? It is interacting with us. So his worldview is already starting to break down. The entailment of Darth's worldview is that you do see God, you see it in everything that happens. And so it stands to reason that if you have people that do not infer the existence of that creator being from all the things they see growing and changing and happening in that world that he's enervating, there's a problem with that revelation. And then he has to account for that. And Christians do. Lots of theologies do. Christian theology in most cases will account for it with the noetic effect of sin. We're blinded to God's glory, even in the creation that he's given to us, because sin has blinded us to the truth of his existence, or whatever. There, done and done. Now you just have to ground sin. Sorry. Not sorry. No, I'm not sorry. Ground sin, and then we'll talk.
I mean, maybe he's got an invisibility cloak.
No, listen carefully to my question. Can you defend the statement that in a world where there is a creator God, you would necessarily see him? Can you defend that?
I don't think so.
Good.
I don't know.
Then saying God doesn't exist. So when you said God doesn't exist because I don't see him, you're implying
I don't feel him, I don't hear him.
Okay, it doesn't matter. You are.
Why would that matter? Those are reasons why you would be inclined to think that he's not there. Unless Darth can make a connection, this is the weakness to his thing. He has to make the connection between the stuff that God makes and God necessarily existing. That has to be necessary. But if part of that necessity is that there are people wandering around in this world, if Darth's worldview is true, this is the world that we live in, and there is a God, and he did make all this stuff. Part of the reason that he made this stuff was to reveal himself to us in the creation he made. And yet there's tons of people that they don't believe in him. And they certainly don't believe in the correct one. So, I mean, Darth has a lot of work to do to make this kind of this weird connection. The idea that, like, well, I don't see him either directly or indirectly. I don't see that this is evidence of God. Like, well, how does that follow? Shouldn't it follow from a God that reveals itself in its work? Otherwise, he's just begging the question. No, the fact that there are trees growing is evidence that there's God. How? Because there are trees growing. What? The only reason trees can grow is because God made them. Well, how do you know that? Because there's trees right there, bro. Nope.
Implying that you are justified in saying God doesn't exist because you don't see him, but you just admitted, right, that it doesn't follow because you don't see God, therefore God doesn't exist. You just said you couldn't defend the position that if a God did exist, you would necessarily see him.
This is such the fact that he's fixated on this is telling, because this isn't really even worth talking about. As far as like rage giving, or a reason for is disbelief, not seeing it, not meeting it, not experiencing it, it's perfectly valid rationale. Darth's convinced he's going to be like, no, what you need to do is provide me and he's not being clear. Like, you need to provide a rationale that explains why it's necessarily the case. Rage does not have to do that. Knock writes, he doesn't ever really let me answer. He complains so much when I overtalk him, but he never lets me finish my troll. I say troll because at this point I'm just fucking with him. Brett recognizes it. I have known Brett a while. He's about to stop it. Yeah, I did see that he's.
So that you've just admitted that your own reason is not rational.
Cool.
So
I'm
do
gonna
you?
start calling myself
I'll
a
repeat
rational
again.
atheist.
You see, and the reason why I'm sticking to this is because
It's
you're
just-
pretty much loudmouth
What you do.
atheist on YouTube. I want to know right now to the YouTube audience.
I am.
Hear that? Him poking that meaty finger on the desk.
Tell me logically, without repeating what you've said before, because I've rebutted everything you've said. Tell me right now, logically, why there is no creator God.
He's gonna hurt his finger if he keeps doing
It's
that.
not necessary.
How did that? You're restating the same claim. How did you determine that God is not necessary?
I don't know. I woke up one day and said, "Poof, there's no God."
Yeah. Okay. So here's the bottom line. We've been going around and around and around.
You're really worked up today, Garth.
You have no. This is how I normally talk.
I know
You have no. See, this is what you're doing. You're trying to deflect the fact that you are an outspoken atheist on YouTube. And I want to show to the YouTube audience, you have nothing. You have no logical, rational basis to assert there is no God, do you?
Yes.
What is it?
I don't see it.
Yeah, that's already been rebutted. Do you have
That was not rebutted. What the hell is wrong with this guy?
a counter rebuttal? You see, laughing
Tell me-
like a
tell
drunk
me-
teenager
tell
doesn't
me-
get you out.
You can't say that anymore. I don't drink anymore. Tell me the rational, reasonable reason for God.
Okay, I'll be glad to discuss that with you.
He goes right back to that. It's like an NPC. It's like one of those bad choose your own adventure bugs. I'll be glad to discuss that with you. Now back to the finger starts dancing off the desk.
And by that question, are you conceding that you, in all honesty to the YouTube audience out there, are you admitting by asking me that question that you do not have a logical, rational basis
That
there is no God?
I admit, Darth, that I do not have a rational, logical basis that you accept.
No, that's not.
Right. Okay. Salute to Knock for that one. I do not have a rational, reasonable reason that you would accept.
The question I ask you, what you are now doing is
I did what you wanted, dude.
Would you please not overtalk me?
Okay.
I've been bending over backwards, trying not to overspeak you.
Cool.
Now, saying that you've given an answer, but I don't like it, is a sleazy retort. I want to hear from you.
But is it inaccurate? I'll concede. Maybe it is sleazy. If it is, I mean, it would be an answer, kind of answer that I would give, and I would gladly wear the accusation of sleaziness. But is it inaccurate? I don't think so. Mark Reed says it's only 1 a.m. I got to do something for debate tomorrow, and Jeff distracted me. I blame him. Go ahead. It is my fault. I blame myself.
A logical, rational basis why there is no God.
All right, I'm done with that.
What the fuck? Brett just dumped him? Holy shit.
Me
Sorry,
too.
Darth, you can come back later. I'm too tired though, and you keep asking the same thing, and Rage tells you he simply doesn't feel like there's enough evidence for him, and I don't see why.
It's funny how he kept accusing Rage of talking over him when he was the one doing that too.
Yeah,
Rage
Darth,
didn't even get a
Darth, you
sentence
can
out
come
there.
back
Be like,
later. I ain't got no hate towards Darth, but fuck, man, every time you come in, you just kind of take over and you put everybody on fucking eggshells. Relax here, fella.
It's been a
Damn.
while with Darth, man. He waited for an opportunity to where, like, I guess John wasn't around, but John hadn't been around for a while.
Yeah, there was a time. Yeah, John. I think Rage is talking about John Peterson there. And there was, I think it was like 2 years ago, maybe. I don't know. John Peterson had like Rage came into, or not Rage, Darth came into Rage's room and had a conversation. And John just like It was not good. It was dirty. It was quick. It was vicious. And Darth fled in record time. He just disappeared. All right. Okay. I'm going to end that there. That was good. I got more out of that than I thought. Darth was, I don't know what he was doing 3 months ago back when that was going on. He was probably in between Discord channels and Clubhouse crap. Let's see. I do want to put this on here. JL Warren asks, Leah Phileas, always wondered, do you have a one-hitter quitter for Darth's argument? I think it depends on which portion of the argument that you mean, because I think there's some that are easier to knock down. I'm getting more and more to the point where the stuff where he keeps talking about the contingent stuff and all that kind of crap. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's like, okay, if you're trying to put an atheist or a non-believer in a position of presenting an argument that refutes the existence of an absolute disembodied mind, which is also the creator of all of reality, that's not going to get you to Christianity. And if that's all you're trying to argue for, all a person has to do is just basically concede that there could be an ultimate disembodied mind that created all of reality, and then just leave them to say, okay, now how do you know that it showed up in the first century as Jesus and died for our sins and resurrected? Connect that, right? They still have to do the work of going from deism to theism, because to me, that's all they're really kind of doing with that. Is just that kind of like, oh, well, I'm going to get you to acknowledge the fact that there could be something like this. Although deism isn't exactly, they're going from theism, but it's like, okay, if there is a theistic kind of a possibility of some kind of theistic entity like that, they have to then show that necessarily, because everything that they're doing has to be based on arguments from necessity in order to show that it's impossible for it to be anything other than Jesus, then it needs to be necessarily connected, the properties of that particular general theistic thing, to the God described in the Christian Bible, and they can't. They try to make those little connections, but then there's just as many. The more they try to weave that together, the worse it kind of gets for them. Here we go. I'm going to present. We're going to wrap this up with this one. This is Darth Dawkins could not answer this simple question. I'm a little bit. I watched this when it first came out. This was from last week. Let me play this one and we'll see. This is very quick.
Hey Darth, I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you define evil?
Evil is the deviation from the character and the will of God.
So it's going against God's will, right?
Deviating from the character and the will and purpose of God.
Okay. So how do you ground evil?
What does that even mean?
Like you say, everything is grounded in God's nature, right? So wouldn't evil be grounded in God's nature as well?
Now, we'll see what happens when he comes back.
I think he cut out.
Yeah. So you're confusing God giving a creature the capacity to make choices versus the choices that are implemented by the agent.
No, he wasn't. He disappears for 32 seconds. And now I don't know what happened there. I'm thinking maybe he muted because he had to drop something. Something happened. I think he got interrupted to be charitable. And then when he comes back, it's interesting. He comes right back into the free will thing. But that's how he's going to do it. Like that doesn't ground it. That doesn't ground evil, because he's trying to get into this trying to clarify that this has been a thing for a while for Darth. I think more people need to ask him this if they get an opportunity. Like, how do you ground you? This was something I think I challenged J. Robin with, and J. Robin couldn't do it. So yeah. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up here. I've been going for a little over 2 hours. So yeah, it's time to stop. I'll stop the screen here. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for keeping things lively. You guys have been having a hell of a conversation in there. And thanks, everybody, for checking in live. Like and subscribe and do all that kind of stuff, or share, whatever you want to do. Any suggestions or anything, just hit me up. To J.L. Warren, if he's still watching. Yeah, if you do want to do if you want to set up a debate, if you're interested in having me and or Peter kind of moderate that debate, I'd be happy to, depending on when you're going to do it, but we can hammer out schedules if that's something that you want to work with. So just let me know, hit me up either. I think you're on Discord with me. I'm pretty sure that you can find me on there, but you can always email me and I can send you a link, whichever way works best. So yeah. And for everybody else, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. Mark Reed, have a great night. I'm sorry I interrupted your debate prep, but I will quit being a distraction for others, and I will get out of here. So for everybody else, have a great one, and I will catch you all later.